Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. My name is Branislav Berec, and in this video we're going to learn how to play Pole Position from Do It Games, who were kind enough to give us this review copy. This is a Kickstarter prototype version, so everything you're about to see in this video is not the final version of the game, and here is how it plays. First, select the race circuit you want to play on, then place the lap token on the first lap, and then define the weather conditions. To do that, roll this six-sided die. It's called the standard die. The first number determines the column, and then the second number determines the row where you place the token. Then roll the die for the third time, and this second weather token starts on the space indicated by that number. Then prepare the event deck with the following cards: 3 light breakdowns, 1 heavy breakdown, 1 engine, brakes, weather and safety car card. Shuffle all these cards together and place the deck on the designated space on the game board. Then each player chooses a color and takes all the components for the race, the dashboard, car tile of the chosen color, 4 cubes of the chosen color. 3 of them are placed on these tracks. This is the brakes track, engine and the driver skill points. First 2 cubes are in the position number 7, the last one in the position number 8. Keep the fourth one nearby together with the car of your color. Then this is the tire token and the tire lifespan token. Then this is the pit stop token, tire compound indicator, off-track indicator and the DRS indicator. Then 2 different qualification tokens. And then choose your driver card and the team skill card. In a 2-player game, each player controls 3 cars in the game, and in a 3-player game, each player controls 2 cars in the game. Before the start of the race, you have to determine the starting positions of the cars in that race. To do that, you would go through 3 qualification rounds. Each qualification round starts with the player with this number 1 on their driver card, then the player with the card with number 2, and so on. To determine your qualification lap time, again, use the standard die, roll it, and take your 4th cube and use this race position track and mark your speed or lap time with your cube. In general, dice in this game indicate your speed, so the higher number, the faster you go. So even for the qualification, the higher number, the better. So that's the contrary to the position of your car in the race. We are using this track in the qualification rounds only to indicate the speed of each car, not the position in the qualification. Then the next player will also roll the die, so in this case the speed would be 5. And once all players are done, the slowest car, in this case the green car, would be eliminated from the qualification and would actually start the race from the last position. Therefore, all players now take their qualification tokens and secretly choose one of them and place it face down or using this side up. When all players have made their choice, reveal your chosen token, and if you use this one, you may spend a skill point to perform 2 additional qualification rolls. If you reveal this token without this ×2 indicator, you don't do any additional rolls in this qualification round. If you decided to make 2 additional qualification rolls, start with the player in the last position, make 2 additional rolls, and choose the best roll from all those 3 rolls. After that, the first qualification round is definitely over, and the slowest car in the last position, will start the race from the last position. So this would be the car starting in the last starting position. In case there is a tie for the slowest lap speed or lap time in the qualification round, the player with the lowest number on their driver card is eliminated and starts the game in the last position. So at the end of the first qualification round, remove the cube of the player which was eliminated from the qualification, and all the remaining cars start the second qualification round. All players who proceed to the second qualification round must spend one of their skill points. That second qualification round is performed in the exact same way as the first round. After those first initial rolls, players will again take their qualification tokens and secretly choose one of them. And after revealing the tokens, those players who would choose this token would again spend a skill point and perform 2 additional rolls. Then the slowest car is eliminated and starts the race from the 5th position. So we have the green car starting from the 5th starting position, and all the remaining players continue to the 3rd and final qualification round. Again, the players who advance to the next round must spend one of their skill points. In Q3, in the 3rd qualification round, no players will be eliminated, but the position of the player markers determines the starting position. So here, the red player would start the race from the 1st position, blue player from the 2nd position, and if players are tied, the player with the lower driver number starts the game in the lower position. So the purple player would start from the 3rd position and yellow player from the 4th position. Now you can actually use this track to determine your position in the race, so you can arrange the player markers according to their starting position in the race. So we are ready to start the race, players are in the starting positions, but before that each player must choose their starting tire compound, either the soft tires, hard, intermediate or wet in case there is rain already. All players take their tire compound indicators, secretly choose one of them, and when all players made their choice, they reveal their tire compounds simultaneously. Then place your tire compound to the selected tire and the tire lifespan indicator to the corresponding position based on the lifespan on your currently selected tire. If you would choose the hard tire compound, you would start in the position number 4 with the soft tires in position number 2. Now we are ready to start the race, but keep in mind that your driver card and the team card give you some special abilities which are permanently available to you during the entire race. So here we are starting the race, starting with the first player and continuing to the last player in the race position. All players will perform 3 rolls with this standard die. If you roll 1 or 2, you would move 4 spaces. When rolling 3 or 4, you would move 5 spaces, and when rolling 5 or 6, you would move 6 spaces. Only now, at the start of the race, when you are on this straight, you also take into consideration these dashed lines. So after rolling the die, in this case I would move 6 spaces, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You must always use the full number of movement points you gain, so in this case it would be 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there would be a third roll, in this case only 4 spaces, and that would be 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now this movement will be explained in just a minute. You would perform the same starting procedure for all the remaining cars, and again only at the start of the race you would be able to move even diagonally, and you can only move diagonally until you reach the first curve, which is this red line at the start of the curve. You may overtake the cars without any special overtaking rules, which again I'm going to cover later in the video. And once all players have completed their starting procedure, the race start movement is over and we will proceed to the standard rounds. At the end of this race start movement and also at the end of each round, you will have to determine the race order for the next round. The car which is furthest ahead is in the first position, then this will be the second position, third position and so on. And if the cars are in the same position, in the same space, they keep their relative position. So the purple car ahead of the gray car. In case there are cars in the same position in the corner, count the number of spaces to the end of the corner, which is this line over here, and the car with fewer spaces to the end of the corner is ahead of another car. Here, the red car has 3 spaces, yellow car has 4 spaces. That means the red car is ahead of the yellow car. If there was a tie, if both cars would have same number of spaces to the end of the corner, then the car in the outer lane goes first. And if there are any cars in the pit stop or in this pit lane exit and another car crosses the finish line, this car overtakes all the cars in the pit stop or in the pit lane. So here this purple car would be ahead of the gray car and the green car. Each round, players will take turns, starting with a player in the first position and then continuing to the last player. However, at the start of each round, you have to update the weather conditions. To do that, you have to roll this weather die. You perform one roll, and if you roll this weather symbol, you move this weather token to the next space on this track. If the die result would be the empty face, nothing happens and you don't move this token. Now, if the token is already on the space number 6 and you roll another weather symbol, move this token to the position number 1, but you also move this token next space forward, so moving it to the right. That may change the current weather conditions and you would apply those conditions immediately. If this weather token would be already in the last column and you roll the weather symbol and you update the weather conditions, move it back to the first column. In addition, anytime you roll the weather symbol and you update the weather condition, you also have to roll this 12-sided event die, and if you roll number 1, which could be quite rare because it's just one side out of 12, but if you roll number 1, reveal the next event card, and if the event card is this kind of breakdown card, all players would again roll the standard die and the player with the lowest roll would have to apply that effect. Then the card is removed from the game. There are 3 types of weather conditions in the game: dry, light rain and heavy rain. I'm going to explain the effects of these weather conditions on the race at the end of the video. So, when it's your turn to move your car, you will have to roll the die, and the color of the die you're going to roll is determined by your current tire type used. If you use these intermediate tires, you would roll the green die. With hard tires, you would roll the yellow die, and so on. After you roll the die, move your card forward number of spaces that is rolled on the die. Here it's 6. You are not forced to use all those movement points. If it's more convenient, you may move fewer number of spaces forward. If you wouldn't be happy with your die roll, you may spend 1 skill point and re-roll your die. This can be repeated as many times as you want or as you have skill points available. You can even repeat your race start movement rolls. In that case, you would re-roll the standard die. Now let's take a look how you move on the straights. The straight is a range of track which starts with the spaces which are right behind this last shadowed space of the corner. So in our example, the straight starts with these spaces and ends with the spaces marked with this double arrow. When on the straight, you can move only forward or laterally. You may not move diagonally. So you could continue like this, then lateral move and continue forward. This start-finish straight has these dashed lines, and remember, these are only considered during the start of the race, during your very first move. Later in the game, you can completely ignore those dashed lines as if they wouldn't even exist. So for the 1 movement point, you would move like this. This would be second movement point, this would be the third one, because now 1 space is only between these solid lines. The corner starts with these spaces which are right behind the space with this double arrow and ends with the last shadowed space. Now, following this corner, we can see another straight starting with this space and ending in this space. When moving through the corner, you can move forward or you can move laterally forward. That means if you would be in this space, you can move to this space forward, or you would be able to move to this space or this one. You would not be able to move like this. When you move through the corner, before or after you spend all the movement points from the roll, you may spend up to 3 skill points and only 2 skill points in rainy conditions, and move additional spaces forward. For each skill point you spend, you may move one additional space forward. You may only do that when you are inside the corner, and as I said, either before or after you spend all the movement points from the die roll. In addition, when you enter the corner through this space with this double arrow, you may use this racing line and cut the corner in the fastest possible way. That means that when you spend movement points, the first one would be to this double arrow space, then the first shaded space, then the next shaded space, and so on until you clear the entire corner. However, if there is another car in between those shaded spaces, you may not move through that car. You would have to go like this. This is the first movement point, second and third. Then you have to leave this ideal line. The next movement would be like this. Now in this moment there would be something called the fight for the position, which I'm going to explain in just a minute. But let's say you win that fight. You can regain the racing line by moving to another shaded space, and from there you can continue moving through shaded spaces. The corners which are delimited with these red lines and the red double arrow are called technical corners, and in these technical corners you are not allowed to regain the racing line. So if you are forced to leave the ideal racing line, you would have to move one space by one. Even if you regain the racing line, you can still only continue moving by one space. Similar to spending skill points in the corners and moving additional spaces, you may spend one engine point, this time not the skill point but one engine point, and move your car additional 3 spaces or 2 spaces in a rainy condition, and all these spaces must be on the straight, however excluding this last space with a double arrow. This is called engine forcing, and you can actually do it twice in the same turn. If you do it for the second time, this time you have to spend 2 engine points, and again move your car up to 3 additional spaces only on the straight and before the spaces with this double arrow. Even with the engine forcing, you can only use it before or after you use all the movement points from the die roll. Another special type of movement is braking. If you are maximum 3 spaces away from this double arrow of the corner, or only 2 spaces in the rainy conditions, you may use one brake point and move up to 3 spaces. Again, only 2 in the rainy conditions. Even with braking, if you use the braking for the second time in the turn, you would have to spend 2 braking points instead of 1 and move up to 3 spaces. On your turn, you can use the combination of engine forcing, braking and moving through the corners. For example, here you can spend a brake point to move 3 spaces to reach the double arrow space. Then you can roll the die and move the indicated number of those spaces, and since you end your movement in a straight, you can use the engine forcing and move 3 additional spaces. Then you can use the second braking and move 3 spaces through this double arrow, and then potentially use the skill points and move additional spaces through the corner. Now let's take a look at overtaking. If you are going to overtake the car, the player who controls the car which is being overtaken must either let you go through or fight for the position. If that player doesn't want to fight for the position, you may simply continue your movement. However, if that player decides to fight for the position, then you will have to win that fight to overtake. Both players will now roll the standard die, starting with the player who wants to overtake. And let me now use these pit lane counters to demonstrate the procedure. And then the car being overtaken. If the second car would also roll the same number, a collision between both cars will occur. The overtake doesn't take place. Both cars remain in this position and the collision will be resolved. I'm going to describe that in just a minute. If the car which is being overtaken would roll a different number, then the attacker may modify that roll based on the number of movement points remaining. If of those 7 movement points you would still have 3 movement points remaining, exactly 3, you would increase your roll by 1 to 4. If you would have exactly 4 movement points remaining, you would increase that initial roll by 2 and your new value would be 5. And if you would have 5 or more movement points remaining, your initial roll would be increased by 3. Since in our example, yellow player rolled 7 and started in this space, yellow player still has 5 movement points remaining, so the starting value of 3 is now increased to 6. Then, if the attacker has higher roll number than the defender, the attacker is winning the fight for the position and is going to overtake that car. If they would have the same values, or even if the attacker would have the lower value, the defender would be winning the fight. Now, whoever is losing at the moment, in our example it will be the defender, may start bidding the skill points. For each skill point you bid, and again let me use these tokens to illustrate the bidding, you may increase your die roll by 1. During one bid you can bid more than 1 skill point. However, in this situation the defender wins, so the attacker may now also bid a skill point to increase the die roll by 1, and this bidding can continue until at least one of the players would pass. So let's say now the red player would decide to pass, which means the attacker, the yellow player, wins the fight for the position and will actually overtake the red car, and the winner of the auction has to spend those skill points now. So it would be 2 skill points for the yellow player. The losing player doesn't need to spend any skill points. If the overtake is successful, the overtaking player can now use the remaining movement points and continue moving forward. If the fight for the position would be won by the defending player, then the attacker must remain in the current space and all the remaining movement points are forfeited. Now, there are a few additional rules for the overtaking. If you are on the straight and the car you are going to overtake is in one of these outside lanes, you may avoid fighting for the position by overtaking the car through the opposite outside lane. In that case, you simply overtake that car without any fighting. If the defending car is in the middle lane, then you don't have a choice and you have to fight for the position. Then, if you are on a straight and you win the fight for the position, your next movement point can be spent to move diagonally. In addition, if you approach the car in front of you from the space which is directly behind that car, you may use the slipstream and move diagonally to the space which is adjacent to the defending car, and then you may fight for the position if the defender wants to defend. Again, if you win that fight, your next movement point can be spent to move diagonally. In rare situations, you may overtake 2 cars at the same time. In this situation, if you would try to overtake them, you would only have to fight for the position with the green car, using all the standard rules we have just covered. That means you may use the slipstream, and if you win the fight for the position, again you may move diagonally in your next movement. If you have to use the middle lane, you can again use the slipstream, but then you must fight both of those cars. First, the car which is in a later position, then the car which is in the leading position, and if you lose one of those fights for the position, you must remain in your space. If you win both of those fights, again, you can move diagonally. When you try to overtake the car in the corner, if you are in a racing line, you have to temporarily abandon that racing line, and when you are side by side with the car being overtaken, so when the space where your car is has a contact with the space of another car, the fight for the position occurs. So in this example it would be here, not here, when the yellow car would actually be already in front of the red car. When you win the fight for the position and you have movement points remaining, you may regain the racing line and continue through shadowed spaces. However, this would not be possible in these technical corners, only in the standard corners. In these technical corners, you would have to continue one space by one. Similar to overtaking on straights, If the cart is on the inside lane and you are moving through the outside lane, you don't fight for the position, you may simply overtake the car. One last note, if you reach the car which is one lap behind, no fight for the position takes place, the other player is eliminated from the game. In this game you will also find this DRS system, the drag reduction system, which helps drivers overtake the cars in front of them on the long straights. When you end your movement exactly one movement point behind another car right in front of you, or in the same row of spaces, however, you would be one position behind the car in front of you or next to you, then you can use the DRS, mark your car with the DRS token, and in your next turn you can use this DRS and you can add +2 to your die roll. There's only one limitation to this DRS system, you may not use it in the rainy conditions. Since you can only activate the DRS if you end your movement exactly one movement point behind the car in front of you, this also applies if you are taking the racing line in the corner. So if you would end your movement like this, you are exactly one movement point behind the car in front of you, which means you can activate the DRS in your next turn. When you try to overtake a car in front of you and the defender fights for the position, if both players roll the same number on the standard die, the overtake doesn't take place and a collision occurs. All involved players must now roll the standard die again to determine the damage. When you roll 1, nothing happens. When you roll 2, you have to reduce your break points by 1. If you would roll 3, you would have to reduce your engine point. And by the way, if you have to lose the brake point or the engine point and you would not have any more available, you would be out of the race. If you would roll 4 or 5, you would suffer the light breakdown and you would place this token on your player board. And if you would roll 6, you would suffer the heavy breakdown and you would place this token on your player board. Immediately after rolling the die, you may spend one skill point to re-roll your die and choose which result you want to choose. At any time during the game, you can have maximum 1 unrepaired damage. If you would suffer another damage, you would be eliminated from the race immediately. That means whenever you suffer a damage, make sure you repair that damage as soon as possible. Now, note that these damage tokens have a value. Light breakdown token has a value 1 and the heavy breakdown token has a value of 2. Your car can withstand maximum 3 points of damage or 3 points of breakdowns. If at this point you would suffer another damage, again you would be eliminated from the race even though these damages have been repaired. You can suffer maximum 3 breakdown points over the course of the entire game. Then, if you suffer the heavy breakdown, from now on you have to subtract 1 from your tire rolls, from your die rolls. So this would not be 7, this would be 6. You would continue to do so until you repair that damage, which you can do during the pit stops, which I'm going to cover at the end of the video. Light breakdowns don't affect the tire rolls. When the collision occurs and at least one of those cars suffers a damage, either light breakdown or heavy breakdown, the yellow flag appears in the race. If the collision occurs on the straight, place the yellow flag at the start of the straight and then the green flag at the end of the straight where the double arrow is located. If the collision would occur in the corner, place the yellow flag at the start of the corner and the green flag at the end of the corner. Now, in this yellow flag area, overtaking is not allowed in this round and also in the following round. Only then, after those 2 rounds, remove the flags and the race continues normally in that sector. When the collision occurs and both cars suffer any kind of damage or any kind of breakdown, the safety car will be deployed. Immediately interrupt the race and follow this procedure. First, roll the weather die 4 times and apply the results after every roll. And if you have to move the weather tokens, like in this example, don't roll the event die. Now all cars must now line up behind this safety car line. So using the current race order, you would line up those cars behind the safety car line. And for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to keep these damage tokens near these 2 cars that have collided. And then move all the remaining cars along the racetrack to this queue behind the safety car. That would apply to all cars on the racetrack. And if any of those cars would cross the start-finish line in order to get to the queue behind the safety car, they would have to update the position of their tire lifespan marker by moving it 1 space down. I'm going to talk about the tires right after this safety car section. Now, excluding those cars that have collided, each other player, each other driver is going to be asked whether they want to do a pit stop or not. If the driver decides not to do a pit stop, they remain in their current position. If they decide to do the pit stop, let's say these 2 cars want to do the pit stop, they will be overtaken by the cars that have not decided to do the pit stop. So we would have the purple player here, then the blue player, and then these 2 cars, keeping their relative order, will go behind the cars that did not take the pit stop. The cars that have collided together will be at the very back of the queue. So this is how the queue behind the safety car would look like in our example. And after you line up the cars behind the safety car, move the lap counter to the next lap. If that lap counter would actually exceed the last lap of the race, for example, if you would have the 6 laps race, the race would be over. And if you would move the lap counter to the last lap, you would only have this very short distance to the end of the race. Now in this chapter I'm going to talk about the tire compounds. There are 4 types of tires in the game: wet tires used for heavy rain condition, intermediate, suitable for light rain conditions, and then hard tires and soft tires suitable for dry conditions. Each tire compound also determines which die you will roll for your tire rolls or the die rolls. This wet tire die has the lowest numbers, while this soft tire die has the highest values. In addition, each tire compound has this lifespan number which indicates how many laps that tire will last. And every time you cross the finish line or you enter the pits, you must apply wear to your current tires, and you do that by updating this tire lifespan marker. If you would use hard tires or soft tires, you always reduce the lifespan by 1. If you use intermediate tires, if there are rainy conditions, light rain or heavy rain, you reduce the tire lifespan by 1. However, in a dry weather conditions, you would reduce it by 2 spaces. And if you would use the wet tires, if there was a heavy rain, you reduce the lifespan by 1. In a light rain, you would reduce it by 2 spaces, and in dry conditions, you would reduce it by 3 spaces. When the lifespan marker reaches this -1 position, all your die rolls must be reduced by 1, so this would be 7. Similarly, when you reach this -2 position, all your die rolls must be reduced by 2. Furthermore, if your lifespan marker is in this -2 position, there is a risk of puncture. And so after you roll the die and perform your movement, you have to roll the standard die. If you roll 2 to 6, nothing happens, but if you would roll 1, you would suffer heavy breakdown, which simulates the puncture. And from now on, you don't have to roll this standard die after you move the car. There is one exception: with wet tires you may never get a puncture. If you would fight for a position, if you have a puncture, your standard die roll is reduced by 1. When the weather is updated and the weather conditions change from dry to wet, racing on the wet track becomes very difficult. In these light rain conditions, which are these light blue spaces, if you roll more than 8, so 9 or 10 or any higher number, you will get off the track. That's why it's very dangerous to use these hard tires or even the soft tires, and it's more suitable to use the intermediate tires with values 6, 7, 8, and there's only one phase with value 9. In these heavy rain conditions, if the marker would be here, if your die roll would be 8 or more, you also get off the track. So that's why in heavy rain conditions these wet tires are a better option. Here the values are 5, 6, 7 and there's only one phase with number 8. So when you roll higher number than the limit, instead of moving by the number of spaces shown on the die, you only move 4 spaces and then you get off the track. That is indicated by this off-track marker. Any other car can now overtake that car as if this car would not be even on the track, because thematically that car is actually off the track. Now on your next turn you again move only by 4 spaces, or you spend 4 movement points and remove the off-track marker. But even in this turn, all other cars can easily overtake you without fighting for the position. In order to avoid going off track, you may spend your skill points, and for each skill point you spend, you reduce the tire roll by 1. You may spend as many skill points as you want to get you down to the limit. So in the light rain conditions, you get off the track only if you roll 9 or more, so with 8 you would be within the limit and you can move those 8 spaces and stay safely on the track. So, in order to change the tires and repair the damage, you have to take the pit stop. To enter the pit stop, you have to go through this pit entry lane. You perform the standard die roll. So in this example we have 9. And the pit entry lane has these blue dashed lines. They are considered in the rainy conditions, light rain or heavy rain. So here it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you have enough movement points to get to the pit stop, you only spend as many movement points as needed to get to this area. And take this movement point counter and mark how many movement points you have remaining. Then, since you have completed another lap, reduce the lifespan of your current tires. Place the pit stop marker showing this stop in your pit box and recover 3 skill points. Now, this is the end of your turn. On your next turn, flip this marker to the other side showing first gear and choose which tires you want to use. Then remove your used tires, but mark how many laps are remaining from the lifespan of those tires. Here we have still 2 laps remaining. This is important if you would decide to use those tires again later in the race. Then select the new tires and move the lifespan marker to the position indicated by the lifespan of your new tires. If the set of tires you're going to use has already been used previously, place the tire lifespan marker on the indicated number. So in this case it would be only 3 laps remaining for those tires. Then you would remove that marker. Then you can repair the breakdowns if you have any, and again that's the end of your turn. Then after you spent 1 turn in the pit box changing the tires and repairing the damage, you have to spend another turn in the boxes removing this token, revealing the go, and that's it. That's the end of your second turn in the boxes. Then on your subsequent turn, move your car to the start of the pit exit, then roll the standard die, and if you would roll 1, you would move 2 spaces. Again, these blue dashed lines are only considered in rainy conditions, so if there was rain right now, you would move only 1 and 2. If you roll 2 or 3, you would move by 3 spaces. If you roll 4 or 5, you move by 4 spaces, and with 6, you would move 5 spaces. Then, in addition to the die roll, add the movement points you have saved from entering the pits. So in this case, when you roll 5, you move by 4 spaces plus 2. That would be 6 spaces moving forwards. When exiting the pits, you may never cross this solid white line. The game ends when all cars cross the finish line, and the order in which they cross the finish line determines their final position at the end of the race. So in this example, the yellow car would finish first, green car would finish second, the red car would finish third, and so on. It doesn't matter if those cars would actually end up further behind the finish line than the cars that crossed the finish line before them. It's simply the first car that crosses the finish line wins the race. So that's how you play pole position. If you have any questions or comments, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can support the channel on the Patreon page or by clicking the thank you button under the video. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. My name is Branislav Berec and hope to see you next time. I would like to thank everyone who has ever supported the channel, and especially the current supporters listed on this page. If you too would like to support the channel in creation of videos like this and other video tutorials and other content on this channel, please visit the patreon.com/Nithrania.